The modern mind does not feel broken because life is too hard. It feels broken because it has been trained to expect a form of life that never truly existed. We are told that if we become informed enough, efficient enough, connected enough, we will finally feel clear. But many people have never had more access to knowledge, convenience, and stimulation, and still wake each morning with a quiet sense of fragmentation. The promise of modern life was not merely comfort, it was coherence. And that is the promise that failed. In this reflection, you will not be told that your struggle is a personal defect. You will see that much of what you call anxiety, exhaustion, and inner confusion is the predictable result of a mind asked to carry too much, desire too much, and control what cannot be controlled. More importantly, you will see that what feels like a collapse may also be the beginning of a wiser way to live. One of the hardest truths to accept is that the mind is not always wounded by tragedy. Often, it is worn down by excess. Too many choices, too many opinions, too many comparisons, too many invisible demands. We often imagine suffering as something dramatic, but for the modern person, suffering is frequently administrative. It arrives through notifications, unresolved messages, delayed decisions, background worries, and the steady pressure to remain mentally available at all times. The mind was not made to face one great danger after another without rest. It was made to meet reality directly, and then recover. Instead, many people now live in a state of permanent psychological partial attention. And here the first reversal appears. What if your restlessness is not a sign that you need more stimulation, but a sign that you have already had too much of it? We are tempted to answer inner emptiness with more input. Another video, another purchase, another argument, another plan. But the mind rarely becomes whole by being further occupied. It becomes whole when it is allowed to become still enough to hear itself again. The Stoics understood something that now feels almost rebellious. Peace does not come from arranging the world perfectly. It comes from learning the difference between what belongs to you and what does not. Your reputation does not fully belong to you. Other people's approval does not belong to you. The timing of success does not belong to you. Even the behavior of those you love does not belong to you. Yet modern life quietly teaches the opposite. It encourages a constant emotional investment in outcomes that remain uncertain. We call this ambition, responsibility, or awareness. But often it is only disguised helplessness. Consider a simple moment. You send an important message and wait for a reply. An hour passes, then 2. Nothing has happened except silence, yet the mind begins inventing realities. Did I say too much? Too little? Have I been misunderstood? Rejected? Forgotten? A small uncertainty becomes a theater of self-disturbance. This is not weakness. It is what happens when the mind loses its boundary and tries to govern what is not its own. Then comes another reversal. Anxiety is not always caused by having too little control. Sometimes it is caused by trying to exercise control in places where it was never possible. A person can spend years exhausted, not because life is overwhelming, but because they keep making private war against reality, against time, against change, against uncertainty, against the fact that other people remain free. Estaso. This is why failure cuts so deeply in the modern world. Not simply because we dislike pain, but because we have tied identity to performance with unusual intensity. Failure no longer means this effort did not work. It begins to mean I am losing my worth. That is a dangerous confusion. The Stoic does not deny disappointment. He denies its authority to define the soul. A failed plan is an event. It is not a verdict. Think of the person who has done everything expected of them. They studied carefully, worked honestly, tried to make good decisions, and still find themselves uncertain, overlooked, or behind. Modern culture often responds with hidden cruelty. Try harder, optimize more, stay positive. But there are moments when effort is not the missing ingredient. Clarity is. A person may not need more force. They may need a different relationship with outcomes. Strength is not always pushing forward. Sometimes it is refusing to let the external world dictate the meaning of your life. Pain, too, is misunderstood. We treat pain as interruption, as proof that something has gone wrong. Yet some pain is not an error in life. It is part of seeing life truthfully. To love is to become vulnerable to loss. To choose is to close other doors. To mature is to outgrow identities that once protected you. There is sadness in all of this, but not all sadness is sickness. Some forms of pain are evidence that the soul is being enlarged. If this reflection speaks to something you have felt quietly for a long time, subscribe to the channel and leave a thoughtful comment with the question that has stayed with you most. Sometimes a serious conversation begins that way. Here is another hard truth. Much of what we call freedom has become a more sophisticated form of dependence. We are free to scroll, free to react, free to consume, free to reinvent ourselves endlessly, and yet many people have never felt less internally sovereign. Why? Because freedom without discipline becomes exposure. If every impulse is followed, every mood obeyed, every discomfort escaped, the self does not become liberated. It becomes fragile. The next reversal is subtle but decisive. The opposite of oppression is not unlimited choice. It is inner command. A person who cannot sit in silence, cannot endure boredom, cannot delay desire, and cannot meet discomfort without immediate distraction is not free in any serious sense. They are simply unrestrained, and an unrestrained mind is easy for the world to manipulate. This is why fear has become so ambient. Not always fear of catastrophe, but fear of missing out, fear of irrelevance, fear of being ordinary, fear of stillness, fear of facing the self without mediation. We often assume fear comes from danger, but many modern fears come from emptiness. If a person has not cultivated an inner life, silence will feel like exposure. They will need noise to avoid meeting their own thoughts. Imagine the evening after a long day. Nothing dramatic has gone wrong. Yet instead of resting, the hand reaches automatically for the phone. Not because something important is there, but because unstructured consciousness has become difficult to bear. This is one of the clearest signs that the modern mind is not merely tired. It is estranged from itself. And yet this estrangement can become a doorway. The mind begins to heal, not when it finally controls the world, but when it remembers how to inhabit the present, without demanding that it entertain, flatter, or reassure us. Soivd. The Stoics practiced this, not as abstraction, but as training. To pause before reacting, to examine an impression before obeying it, to ask, in the middle of disturbance, what is actually happening, and what is merely being added by interpretation. This may sound simple, but it restores dignity. It returns a person to participation in their own life. Meaning also changes when seen clearly. Modern culture often suggests that meaning is found in intensity, achievement, or public significance. But many lives become hollow through this pursuit. Meaning is rarely loud. More often, it is built through right proportion. Doing what matters without turning it into theater. Carrying responsibility without worshiping busyness. Loving others without losing inward balance, and accepting the limits of one life without resentment. The soul grows calmer when it stops demanding that every moment justify itself with excitement. Another reversal follows. Inner peace is not the reward for solving every problem. It is the capacity to remain in honest contact with life while problems remain unsolved. This is why some people appear composed even in hardship, while others collapse in favorable conditions. Peace is not circumstantial decoration. It is a discipline of perception. So what practical wisdom remains when the noise clears? Reduce what does not deserve a claim on your mind. Be careful what you repeatedly expose your attention to, because attention becomes character. Stop rehearsing conversations that have not happened. Stop negotiating endlessly with opinions you do not respect. Let some ambitions die if they were only attempts to become acceptable in the eyes of strangers. Return to a few stable questions. What is mine to do? What is mine to endure? What is mine to release? The modern mind feels broken, partly because it has been taught to live outwardly first and inwardly second. It has been taught to monitor the world before understanding the self, to chase expression before forming judgment, to seek visibility before building substance. But the human being is not restored by greater display. He is restored by greater alignment, by living so that thought, action, and conscience are no longer at war. In the end, perhaps the mind is not broken in the way we fear. Perhaps it is protesting. Protesting the speed, the fragmentation, the false urgencies, the endless invitation to live everywhere except within. And that protest, uncomfortable as it is, may contain wisdom. It may be the soul's refusal to continue living in a manner unworthy of its depth. So do not ask only how to feel better. Ask what way of living has made feeling whole so difficult. Because the turning point in a human life arrives when a person stops trying to become perfectly adjusted to a disordered world, and begins the quieter, braver work of becoming inwardly free.